O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
Oh, hey, everybody. Episode 88 of the Hunting Collective. Phil and I are feeling good today, aren't we, Phil?
It's Friday.
Friday!
Well, peek behind the curtain. We're recording this on Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday.
It's Friday. I'm excited. Are you?
I don't know.
All right.
But
you should be.
I should be.
Yes.
I should say that I am. Yes, I am. There's a lot of good stuff in episode 88, including I took a trip back to Texas to the hill country to meet with some folks that work at a place called Force of Nature Meats. They make real good, clean food for you, and they do so using regenerative agriculture. Good soil. Fancy buffalo running around in the soil. It's all the circle of life. You'll learn about it coming up in this episode. But before we get into that, Phil and I, we're tying up some loose ends, talking about the mustache. There's a lot of controversy about Phil's segment. We'll address that. And just a lot of tying loose ends as we get into mid-November here on the Hunting Collective. And now, here's the show.
I guess I grew up on an older road, a pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Until I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. When I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels, number 7.
Oh, we're here in the studio. Hey, Phil. Episode 88. Still rolling on here in Bozeman. I'm a little down and out, Phil. Down and out.
Is it the weather? It's kind of gloomy today.
It's gloomy.
It's gloomy today.
It's gloomy. I'm a little jet lagged. I just went to Michigan, Texas, and now back here. You know, it's Friday. Nobody's in the office. Everybody's out hunting. And it's just a little gloomy. So they're out there in listener land. You'll have to excuse me if I sound a little bit melancholy, because that's really what's going on right now.
I'm trying to convince Ben to drink some coffee.
No, I've never had coffee.
See, that's the problem, right?
Ever in my life.
Is it a health thing?
No,
no.
It's just a thing.
You have zero interest in trying.
You know how you just never do something. That's what happened. I just never thought, well, I'll have some coffee, and I just never have partaken. One time I did have like a latte or something in New Zealand.
Yep. And
I was like strung out for a whole week.
Oh.
Because if you gave me a 5-hour energy right now, I would die.
Okay.
I don't drink much
honestly,
caffeine.
if you had a latte, which is usually like 2 shots of espresso, and you felt like you were that wired, I'm sure, I take it back. You probably should start drinking coffee.
All right. And everybody, like, we were talking about this when I was at Rome Ranch. I watch you coffee drinkers when you're drinking this stuff. And it's like, oh, yeah. Like the coffee just like smelling it. Oh, and then you drink. Oh, whatever. It's a weird relationship you have with this liquid.
I'd like to meet these people you're referring to.
I've watched them. I go to the coffee shop and weirdly watch people drink coffee. Just
slurp up their coffee in a
it's like ASMR.
almost sexual way.
Oh yeah, I can't go in the morning without drinking my coffee.
Don't talk to me till I've had my coffee.
I have, and there's like shirts about it. So anyway, now I'm just not doing it because whatever.
Coffee culture.
Coffee culture.
Okay.
Lame. We got to get to. What should we do? We got some poems. A couple of poems.
Really?
Yeah, 2 of them.
Because we praised the last poem you read on the show.
Yeah.
And you're getting more entries.
More poems.
I appreciate that.
We have the final. We're ending the conversation about Phil's mustache.
That's good.
We'll start there. We should start there. We have an email from a guy named Tysor Hansen, and I like, no, see, he put the phonetic. He's been listening. He put the phonetics. He put the pronunciation under it. Tysor, Tysor. His last name, I think I can get Hansen.
Good job.
Thanks, man. He says, to Ben and Phil, because of Philip and his egregious decision-making, I feel like a sailor with no captain. An arrow with no target. A knife with no sharpness. Because of the engineer, I am lost. You see, I'm a longtime listener of the THC. Since Phil first started tickling our eardrums, I have been a supporter. Mango? A marvelous name for a canine. How dare you, Benjamin, condemn a man for such a wonderful name for the man's best friend.
Thank you so much.
Skimpy McWeekstash? More like Strong McWokestash.
Wow, let's reopen the voting.
Yep.
That's the winner.
Since its creation, I've been inspired by the prickly hairs that adorn Phil's upper lip. You see, I am too unable to produce a mustache to wear proudly like Phil. If Callahan's mustache can be compared to a boar grizz, mine can be compared to a newborn fawn. But Phil's endeavors gave me hope. When he started his journey and was ridiculed for Gary's growth, I said, no more! I wanted to support Phil from the shadows and grow a mustache of my own and wear it proudly. But I've been betrayed.
Oh, no.
Not even 10 minutes into episode 87, a bomb was dropped. Phil's mustache was murdered! Put in the sound effect. Dun, dun, dun. Put that in there.
Okay.
Murdered by the man who birthed it. My disappointment cannot be measured. Philip, middle name Taylor. This is good.
This is great.
My day, nay, the entire month has been ruined. My hope is after you read this, is that you are more aware of your actions. Those actions affect the hearts and emotions of others. Fellow listeners, pray that I will be able to recover from Phil's heinous acts.
You know, I had no idea that I was carrying a flame for so many...
Postscript, Phil.
Oh, okay.
It took me quite a long time to craft this email because of the blinding tears in my eyes. In sadness from Louisiana, Tysor.
Okay. Well, first of all, that's inspiring.
Yeah. How's that inspiring?
Well, yeah, like he said, I didn't know my actions would cause a ripple effect that shook the nation. Apparently,
this man is.
He seems heartbroken. I feel bad.
You do.
Well, I feel it's sort of like that thing where you say you don't actually apologize. Instead of saying I'm sorry for my actions, you say I'm sorry I hurt your feelings.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry that you're sad.
Sorry.
But I'm not sorry that I shaved my mustache
That's
off.
how I feel.
You were pretty clear in the last episode that
I made the right decision?
Yeah, and that you only cared about your family's opinion, not ours.
I still feel that way.
Not Tysor's opinion.
Mostly my opinion.
All right, here's a poem. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hunting season... I didn't write this, by the way. I'll tell you who wrote it later.
Okay.
Hunting season comes by once a year, and with this my summer was spent with archery gear. I flung arrows at targets of paper and foam, promised my wife to bring a whitetail home. I read everything from Giannis, Steve, and Cal. I felt like Ben O.B. could be a pal. I learned to cook from the Meat Eater book. I was ready, able, and had the look. The faithful day came, and I rose early. I felt like a hunter, solid, honorable, and burly. I jumped in the truck and steered for the land. arrived in the dark, and made my way to the stand. I climbed carefully and sat in my perch. I was fully legit, wearing all the Meat Eater merch. As the sun rose, I peacefully looked over the lease, and then it hit me. I forgot my release. The end. Peter Oxley.
That was good.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
You've got some creative listeners.
I really do. And I like to highlight them because
That's good.
I've run out of things to say. And so
this is now their show.
This is now your show.
Wow.
Like, we got a lot of real sharp listeners here, don't we? I mean, creative.
Yeah. I like it. I say keep them coming.
Keep them coming. It makes me smile, even in these days when I'm just feeling down, I'm not really sure what to do. It's this kind of fodder that keeps me going. And that brings us to the Work Sharp, Not So Sharp moment. But this week, we had a nomination from our friend Eric Hall. He sent in a little voicemail, and he said this.
Hey, Ben, maybe Mark deserves the Work Sharp, Not So Sharp moment for not turning the lawnmower on.
So, yeah, that's all he said. That's all he said. That's all he said.
Not a bye.
Bye.
Not a fan of the show. Thank you. Just
hey, man. I
Mark.
love it. Eric Hall, you're the best.
That was great.
You are the best. Everything that you say and do, I enjoy. So we will nominate Mark for not being able to start the mower, but he can't win the prize.
No, that would be that's like nepotism.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
So we can't give Mark any prizes. He already has the perfect life on the back 40 there, locked in the back 40.
Paradise.
Can't leave, can't get sick. We're filming him 24/7. So, I mean, he's got the perfect life, I find. So, no, I'm sorry, Eric, we can't do that, but thank you for sending that. And there's some not sharp moments around the office every week. We just can't give anybody field sharpness, so we got to keep it to you wonderful listeners. Phil, play the jingle.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be.
Okay, well, this week, and another person with a name that I'll probably mess up. His first name is Evan. I got that. His last name is Holskin. I said like Holskin.
How is it spelled?
It's not like I just said it. Holzgen. Holsgen.
Oh, Holskin.
Holsgen. You really got to separate that Z and the G. Holsgen.
Holskin.
So sorry about that, Evan, but you knew that was coming. All right. My Work Sharp moment took place 3 years ago. I just started deer hunting at the age of 21. The setting takes place in a northern Michigan cabin that belonged to my fiance, in the middle of the Manistee National Forest. Now, Evan, do not give away your hot spots here, man.
Rookie
mistake. It all began with my fiance's grandfather telling me another one of his spots. These usually involved a vague description of a blind he made from dead trees and branches around 30 years ago. Usually I never found his blinds, but this time he pointed me into a spot that was extremely hard to get to. It involved a fair amount of hiking and a river crossing. I was sure that this would be the home of a giant buck, so I took his advice and set up a tree stand in what I thought to be a prime spot. Fast forward to the end of October, I was on my rutcation and could not wait to finally sit this tree stand for the first time. I was hiking in for an afternoon sit, and I got to the river crossing where my plan was to take off my boots, strip down to my underwear, and cross the river. I was just finishing college and was too poor to afford waders. After I got into my undies, I took one step into the river and immediately sunk up to my waist in the muck. I pushed through and got to the other side, but unfortunately, my frankenbeans itself were covered in an ice-cold loincloth. After sitting the afternoon hunt commando style and not seeing any deer, it was time to cross the river again.
Okay. Well,
What's he going to do now,
It went
Phil?
okay the first time.
Yeah, you just had like cold underwear.
Yeah.
Which, how did you not think you were going to have wet underwear? I don't know how you didn't plan that part out.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
That's pretty not so sharp.
Should have packed a backup.
Yeah. This time it was dark.
Okay.
I stripped down naked, didn't want to put my cold underwear back on, and I began crossing the river. Unfortunately, I took the wrong path and found myself in mid-thigh deep mud. Along with this mud was some sort of tall grass, the kind of grass that sticks to your skin and makes fine little cuts.
Can feel it right now.
Oh boy. The simple river crossing had turned into 25 yards of dragging my berries through mud and cut-inducing grass. Although I made it through without any major injuries, my scrotum truly had a work-sharp moment. This was the last time I took my fiance's grandfather's advice. The end.
Ouch.
Play the jingle, Phil.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be.
All right, Evan. You and your scratched up berries are going to get a Work Sharp field sharpener from our friends at Work Sharp. So thank you so much, Work Sharp, for putting this on. We're having fun putting out your dumb moments. Aren't we, Phil?
Yes, I've been enjoying it. So
That was a mid-level dumb. But it included, like, I seem to be drawn to things that include nudity. We had a breast. No, we had some scrotum.
We got some, yeah.
And so that's just me. I have a child's mind. So deal with it. Deal with it. Now, we got to get to the interview portion of the show and what we're going to do there. There's a lot of things that are wrapped up in the interview you're about to hear, but a few of them I think probably need a little bit of explanation from my end. So this all goes back, Phil. You remember when I went to Berkeley and I interviewed those animal rights folks?
do. Yeah.
Specifically Matt Johnson from Direct Action Anywhere. And then also my good friend and vegan philosopher, Robert C. Jones. So if you haven't listened to those, we'll take a brief pause and let you go listen to this episodes 70 and 71. And we're back. Thanks for listening. What happened during those conversations was enlightening for many reasons, confusing for many reasons. But I think probably the most talked about episodes of this podcast and the 88 that we've done. One thing that came out of that for me, many things came out of it, but one of the things that kind of was at the top level of my mind after listening to those and reading all your reaction and kind of having some months now to think it through was this idea of factory farming. I mean, I'm a hunter. And I eat the meat that I kill, and that denotes that I care about my consumption. And in caring about my consumption, I can't just stop at that point. Hunting has driven me to think about gardening and garden and think about owning chickens to get the eggs. It's driven me to do some things that are kind of parallel to my consumption around wild game. And that has driven me to think about, like, how do we all consume better as species even though that's a little bit dramatic to say. And how do we consume meat better? Because I just don't believe the idea of veganism or animal rights, that we can stop killing animals and it's going to be good for all of us or good even for the animals and for our environment, for our planet. So what's the solution here? I have wondered since that day. And when I went to Berkeley, it kind of bubbled some of these ideas up because obviously those folks there believe in what I just mentioned and are diametrically opposed to kind of what my beliefs are. But in the idea of developing those beliefs and ideas a little bit more, we start to wonder, Phil, about our consumption, all right? Our consumption of meat specifically. And so what's a better way to feed everyone, right? Because you're not a hunter, right?
Not currently.
Yet. We're going to get you there.
Yeah.
So you guys eat a lot of store-bought meat at your house, I bet.
That's true.
Do you guys eat like grass-fed? Do you care? Do you just get whatever you can afford? No judgment, of course.
I mean, we try to go a couple steps above kind of the cheap cuts at the grocery store. But honestly, if you were to ask me like where it comes from or anything, we usually don't.
Yeah.
I usually like look for like at least if it says like organic on the label or grass fed, we try to shoot for that, even though organic that's like a very wishy-washy term.
You're not going to find out where it came from
exactly.
the label.
But like beyond that, no, like, yeah, we don't do I do a pretty piss poor job of kind of being.
But that's not, that's normal.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's probably common for most of us.
People.
Yeah.
And so when I think of the extremes, these poles, right, where you have somebody that's a vegan who says, I'm just going to eat, I'm not eating animal products anymore. Or a vegetarian who's just not going to eat meat. And then you have somebody like me who's like, I love meat, but I'm going to go get it and I'm going to butcher it all myself. And when I pull it out of the freezer, I know where the deer lived, what it ate, what muscle group this is, how long it was aged. I know everything about the meat when it comes out. that steak is fully informed where I'm concerned. But that if you kind of would remove some of that from the equation, there's millions of people. There's 327 million people in this country, and we got to feed all of them. How do we better consume meat? Because we know companies like Tyson, JBS, Cargill, Smithfield, Purdue, these folks have factory farms. And factory farms produce millions of tons of manure a year. They pollute our water with ag runoff. There's lots of things, man. This creates like dead zones in our water. It pollutes our water, pollutes our air. Everywhere from Chesapeake Bay, where I grew up, to the Gulf of Mexico. We know these things. We know these things are happening. And if you listen to vegans, there's a solution. Stop consuming meat. Those pollutions will go away. I don't believe that. I believe that large-scale agriculture, planting monoculture crops, is just as bad for our environment. And the folks that you'll hear from in a minute think it's worse than large-scale animal agriculture. And so here we are with the conundrum that I'd like to try to address, probably in a series of conversations, but definitely in this one with the guys from Force of Nature. What do we do? We have one solution is don't eat any meat. The other solution is eat a bunch of meat and don't know where it comes from. There's got to be something in the middle of that allows us to care for our environment, get the food that we need for all the people that we have, and make sure we all understand the impact. There's just no way everyone can hunt. It's not sustainable. But we got to figure this all out. So I think that's as connected to me as a hunter and someone who likes to go outside as anything that I do. And so I want to, not only just this podcast, but other podcasts, think about this idea and think about it critically. Understand what the problem is and understand what we can do with it. Because if we keep up large-scale animal agriculture, we're just damning ourselves. If we give it up in favor of a more plant-based diet, we're damning ourselves there too. So we got to figure it out. And we got to be somewhere in the middle. And so that was what brought me to Texas, outside of Fredericksburg, Texas, to a place called Rome Ranch. But to me, this is all about how to do better at consumption. And it starts with how do we grow it better? How do we do better at butchering it and getting it into people's homes, into their grocery stores, and into their homes? So Force of Nature is working on that. So get ready to learn about soil, Phil. You know a lot about soil?
Nothing.
I don't know shit about soil. I know that I basically said I know that plants grow out of it, animals eat that, and then I shoot the animals. But beyond that, I can't say as I'm an expert on soil biology and the effect that has on ecosystems. But I was able to talk to Taylor, Robbie, and Marshall from Force of Nature Meats and learn more about what they do, what they think, and why it's important. So we can listen to that and have a good dialogue. Phil, do you feel like you agree with the idea that meat should be ethically sourced, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I mean, like before I applied for a job at this here company, my wife and I went a little over a month going meatless, just to give it a shot, see if we could do it. And not because, just because of like the whole factory farming stuff and like the impact it has on the environment and the the cruelty that's sometimes done in those establishments, and just because I didn't even think of like hunting or finding your own meat as like even like an option.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, or anything that the folks at Rome Ranch do.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Force of Nature Meats.
It's emblematic of everyone.
So I think a lot of people think that like, well, there's factory farms and like that's it, because that's like where a lot of meat comes out of, and that was my mindset when I was like, this is kind of fucked up.
Well, and that's what you'll hear it in the podcast. I don't want to kind of ruin all of the conversation here, but like in the podcast, I allowed that to happen in episode 70, 71 when they're like, factory farms suck, right? I'm like, yep, they do. Mm-hmm. And I was unable to kind of give any more color to that part of the conversation. Yep, yeah. It sucks. And then we move on. Well, there's so much more to that. And I don't want somebody to be like, trophy hunting sucks. And I'm like, yep. And we move on. We're going to have a way larger conversation around that term, similar with assault rifles within the Second Amendment conversation. Like these terms, they can't be monolithic. You can't just allow someone to label something broadly and then walk away from it. So I felt poorly about that part of the conversation when I was in Berkeley. I felt like I could have, had I known more, had I done more research, been able to walk that back a little bit, but like, yeah, factory farming sucks, but hey, here's all the ways farming can be good for the land, can be good for the environment, and can be good for the animals. And so I wanted to pursue that. It's taken me a few months of looking around to find the right folks, but I think the Rome Ranch folks are perfect for it because not only are they practicing a different type of agriculture, they are packaging up the meat that is a product and putting it out there for consumers. So they're right in the middle of this conversation. And if you're looking for a solution, I was pretty compelled with what they had to say. And so, Phil, I mean, I think your situation is as normal as could possibly be. It's an interesting topic. It's got a lot of like pathways to different areas of conversation. And certainly that you'll listen to this interview and that'll come. It comes to fruition in some ways. But I think it's a good starting point. It's a good thing to consider. And I hope you enjoy my conversation with Taylor, Robbie, and Marshall from Force of Nature Meats. Enjoy.
I guess I grew up on an older road, a pedal to the metal.
All right, have you guys ever access deer hunted while you podcast before? Anybody?
This is going to be a first.
So we're sitting, like, I try to start some of these things by describing where we are. So I think this will be a pretty interesting one. Taylor, can you take us through, we'll get to who you are in a second, but can you take us through where we are and maybe what we're looking at behind my left shoulder?
Yeah. Hey. Okay. So this is the Pedernales River Valley. It's in central Texas. We call it the Hill Country, and we're at Rome Ranch. It's about 1,000 acres of regeneratively managed property, and we have a multi-species ranch here.
Yeah. And over my left shoulder is some axis deer, the non-native to the country, which we could be hunting or podcasting, whatever. So if we see a big buck, one of us might have to go out there and take care of it, dispatch it. That's good. Well, let's go around and introduce yourselves. Taylor, you might as well start since we already heard from you.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Taylor Collins. I'm a land steward out here at the ranch. My wife, Katie, and I purchased this property 3 years ago. And like I said, we manage it holistically and regeneratively. So we're just trying to work in nature's image to heal this place and build habitat for wildlife, as well as sequester carbon, infiltrate water, do real amazing things with this property through the use of properly managed bison, turkeys, pigs, chickens, and then all the wildlife that call this place home as well.
There are a lot. We had a tour. We'll get to our tour here in a minute, but we'll keep going around. Robbie?
Robbie Sansom. I had the good fortune to work with Katie and Taylor for many years, and most recently get to put some bison out here on Rome Ranch that they generously allow me to run with their much larger herd, and then co-founder along with them of Force of Nature, which we'll be talking about here in a little bit.
Of course. And you guys have known each other, Taylor and Robbie, for how long? High school, I heard?
Even before that, yeah.
Oh, really?
Middle school, for
Wow.
sure. We we didn't hang out together necessarily, but we always knew of each other and respected each other. And I got in a lot of trouble in middle school, so Robbie was like, I'm staying away from that guy. And then we reconnected later in life.
You know, we should get into that story because I think it's an important one. What you guys did prior to Force of Nature, kind of what brought you to this point. But then, you know, really what brought you together, because I think what we're about to talk about, regenerative agriculture and some of the principles and philosophies around it, it gets pretty complicated. Even for me, I was like, as we were talking about during our tour earlier, it took me a minute to pick it up, but as you guys broke it down, I got it. But I think how you got to this point is as interesting as some of those other pieces that we'll get to. So you guys met in middle school, and then the reconnection, I feel like, was around a company called Epic, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, so we started, my wife and I started Epic in 2013. And, we started Epic at a point in time where we were both raw food vegans. And that diet and lifestyle wasn't working. And particularly my wife, Katie, was training for ultra marathons, and she had won an Ironman. She won her first Ironman. So she qualified for the world championship race. And at that point in time, conventional sports science, nutrition said, hey, to optimize your health and wellness, you have to consume a diet low in fat. The proteins that our bodies can metabolize are plant-based, like processed powders, and then you need syrups to make that stuff taste good. So we were on that path, really trying to optimize our own performance and wellness. And my wife was having crazy GI issues and chronic inflammatory issues, and she was told she needed a total knee replacement at the age of 20. And she had exploratory knee surgery. We saw every expert in Austin, Texas, and it was crazy. Like, okay, you're going to be on rheumatoid arthritis for the rest of your life. Jeez. Can't figure out what's going on.
At 20?
At 20.
Damn.
And so finally we went to a holistic health practitioner who looked at her diet. First thing he asked was, well, what are you eating? And we're like, hey, we're eating clean. We're like raw food vegans. And the guy said, that's your problem right there. What I want you to do is try to, start cooking your vegetables. I want you to reintroduce high quality, pasture raised, grass fed animal protein back in your diet. And we're pretty extreme with how we're hardwired. And so we made a 180-degree pivot, and we cooked steak that night. And then the next day, we boiled the steak, and it was disgusting. Don't ever do that. But it had been so long since we had consumed meat, we forgot how to cook it. And then we made bacon the next morning. Now, oh yeah, this is actually delicious. And so that changed her life and her trajectory, and her symptoms that had been present for over a year went away within days. All of them resolved within weeks. And so we were like, well, holy shit. I failed to mention we had a vegan food company too. And so we were like totally bought into that lifestyle and diet, made this pivot that brought health and wellness back to her body. And we were putting things together, and we were like shocked. So if animals in their environments that they were evolutionarily designed to be in, consuming the diets they're biologically engineered to eat can heal our bodies, what can they do for the planet? What can they do for the soil? And so that was a deeper dive for us to get into this whole concept of soil health, animal health, human wellness, and how it's all interconnected, and how it all fundamentally starts at soil.
Yeah. And did you, in becoming a vegan, was it, and it's essentially a raw food vegan, which is like the extreme version of the diet. For you, was it health conscious? You mentioned that a little bit, or was it just, part of the community you were in, or like what drove you to it in the beginning? Because you're pretty young at that point.
Yeah, it was health conscious at first, and then also there wasn't a lot of access to high quality protein, like in 2013 and before that. And we didn't want to support an industrialized, commoditized industry where animals are in feedlots. And that was the standard at the point in time. Like grass-fed wasn't readily available, and it wasn't available grab and go, so in a convenient package. And so that was kind of the genesis for us starting Epic. And, we were cooking like bacon and steaks and bringing them on bike rides, like 100-mile bike rides. And it was there's nothing better than eating bacon at, mile 90 of a 100-mile bike ride. Challenge you to find something better for your body and spirit. And so we're like, well, we don't have any preconceived limitations of what meat can and can't do, because this is all new to us again. So let's put it in a bar form. And so that's when we launched Epic. And there were other people like us that appreciated the quality and the product and the timing. And so the company just took off and blew up pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, it's blown up big time. When you say 2013, that was shocking to me, how far that company has come in that short of time.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's one Epic product sold every 1.4 seconds, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which is nuts.
And so you, at some point when you were building Epic, you called Robbie and said, hey, need some help.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's how it went. Or,
I mean, pretty much.
Hey, what are you up to?
We were running this thing, and it was a rocket ship, and we were going on gut and instinct and feel. And as things were getting more serious and this amazing opportunity was unfolding, where we could create a new category, change an industry, change how land is managed, people much smarter than us said, you guys got to hire someone who's like on top of it, like has skills that you don't. And they're like, you need to hire someone who knows how to manage money and then can manage a business and manage a team and help grow it. And so we cold called Robbie, and it was like, I'll let you tell the story about that cold call because I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah, well, I think you talked about me and Taylor, but I think what's interesting is that I grew up in the same neighborhood as Katie as well.
Oh, wow.
Katie's a little younger than Taylor and I, but I knew Katie before I knew Taylor and before Taylor knew Katie. So we all had this intermingled this past, but like Taylor said, we all had this mutual respect and appreciation, and we had kept in touch through the years. We'd been on a few bike rides, and I knew that they were doing this clean food company and were involved in endurance events. So we definitely had been, keeping up with what each other were doing. But about the time that Epic was still less than a year old, the product had come out and it was starting to blow up, and all of a sudden it was very clear that things were not only changing quickly, but changing quickly in a way that, like Taylor said, that there was a need to bring on more help. I simultaneously was just coming off of leaving a company that was a super fast growth startup, right? So number 21 on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies my first year. Number 186 my second year. It was just it was also a rocket ship, and I oversaw a ton of stuff. And so because we had been keeping in touch, they knew I had that sort of background, and then because professionally and then personally, they knew that we were aligned values wise, which has always been really important for us, is that we bring people on, like Marshall, who folks got to you got to hunt with, and who introduced himself earlier, that understand what we're doing and the why and the purpose and the passion. And we already had that values alignment. So, but I was actually on my way to go work in a logistics company. So some large private equity firm was buying up all of these transportation companies that were actually somewhat tied to oil and gas. And I was supposed to come in and be the VP overseeing that whole roll up, and then we were going to flip it and sell it. And
it's a lot different than what you're doing right now.
Little different, yeah. And this was at the time where Eagleford Shale had just been discovered and was taken off, and oil was the thing, and we didn't know as much about fracking as we do today. And in hindsight, I'm tremendously thankful I didn't go down that path, and I got to be on this journey. But at the time, coming from the background that I did too, from the world of going to a high-end business school, and they say this is the path, and this is the definition of success that you should strive for, and these are the rules that you play by. That's what I had.
Sorry, Rob. There's a giant axis deer just walking around outside the window.
Officially on our property.
Now they're on the property.
Might have to take a break.
Yeah, we might have to go. Have we seen any bucks out there?
Can you spot those with the scope and see what's going on over there?
Yeah.
I love that. I love how elusive they were this morning when we were hunting, and then how they're actually showing up for the podcast.
And they're just walking in the background.
They want to get in on the action.
They know. They've been around me enough to know. So
completely taunting us.
Just taunt this fella. He'll come out there.
Oh, there's some over here too.
I know.
Poor listeners. They
that
have
looks
to
like a nice.
Listen to us.
They'll get over it.
They can't hear all of our jaws dragging the floor as we were searching for this all day today.
They're fine. They would be doing the same thing if they were here. If all the people listening were here, you would be doing the same thing. There's giant axis deer walking around behind my left shoulder.
Yeah, imagine a beautiful hill country sunset with trees that are the leaves are changing colors. It's the perfect time of day. Low sun in the sky. It's just beautiful. And there's these.
It's like golden field covered in delicious,
tasty animals.
String of about 15 axis deer working themselves out across the field.
Just keeps growing.
Anyway, so if we seriously, if we gotta go, we gotta go. I mean, there's no shame in that game. We gotta get out there,
gotta feed Myrtle.
Yeah, Myrtle. We're gonna get the Myrtle too. I wish Myrtle was here.
So Taylor. Long story short, Taylor. I was supposed to be moving to Houston, and Taylor kind of reached out and just said, "Hey, we need help looking for this position." At the time, it was this company called Thunderbird, and it was small. And I thought, okay, well, that's neat that y'all are doing that. I'm glad that y'all are growing. I'll try to connect you with somebody that, might be a good fit. I got this other thing going on. I didn't think it would be an opportunity for me. And I don't think that they thought it would be an opportunity either. It was just trying to sort of network. And then our emails, as I recall it, Taylor, our emails sort of crossed paths where once we realized what we were talking about, I was thinking like, oh man, this would be the perfect opportunity. This sounds like a dream come true. It's too bad this and this and this. And I think you responded similarly, man, you'd be a great fit. It's too bad that you're moving and going on. And I actually took off the next day to go to Croatia for my last hurrah trip before I finally uprooted and moved from Austin. And so spent the next 14 days talking on the phone to Katie and Taylor every night at about 1 or 2 in the morning, my time. It was 6 or 7 at night their time. And by the time I came back, I was 2 days away from moving to Houston and signed up with Force of Nature. Signed up with Epic at the time.
Yeah. So get this. We hire Robbie. We're like, all right, you're the new CFO, COO. Go do something important. And then Robbie, like the next day, is like, hey guys, you're going to run out of money in 2 days. Like, Robbie, dude, do your job, bro.
Get us more money, Robbie.
That's terrible. We just hired you. We're already out of money. Yeah, fire him.
You're out of here.
There was a lot of second guessing my decision making at that point. Like, what the hell did I just do?
I was just about to say, from Robbie's point of view, he's like, I just uprooted my life, joined this company. Oh
no, it was awesome though. I mean, I think people that know anything about business know you invest in people, and it was really clear that Katie and Taylor are just remarkable humans, and they're really special. And the vision was one that we can all look back on now and say it was truly remarkable, and still is. And so, I think within 2.5 months, we had sold off all of the vegan energy bar company, so we could focus all of our time on Epic. We had closed a round of funding. We had closed a bridge loan to get us to the round of funding since we were running out of money in 2 days. We made our first annual plan, and our team was hyped and ready to go crush it, and we did.
Yeah, now that company is soaring. I mean, I don't know what it's worth, or if you want to say what it's worth, but it's worth plenty. It's worth plenty. I think everybody knows. What were you telling me the stat of like an Epic product is consumed once every...
it's like 1.4 seconds. There's one sold.
Wow.
So yeah, crazy part of that journey actually is we sold Epic to General Mills, right? You've heard of those guys before.
Yeah, those fellas.
In 2016. And, we built the brand. Never was it the intention to sell the brand. It was always, this brand was developed to drive positive change in agriculture, especially livestock agriculture. But we always knew in the back of our head, if we could find a partner that could scale it bigger and better than we could ever have accomplished independently or in our lifetimes, that would be a no-brainer. And so, we had 3 different multinational companies try to acquire Epic. One within the first 3 months of the business. And we walked away from that because it wasn't the partner that aligned with our values. And so, yeah, we sold to General Mills, and we're still guiding and leading that vision, but doing other things in life like Rome and Force of Nature. And so it's all been a really positive experience.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah, I mean, to in that short of a time, when we started this conversation, I expect you to say, back in 2005 when we started this. But I mean, in that short of time, I think it says a lot about you guys and what you believe in. I mean, I think we'll talk a little bit about this ranch and Force of Nature, because I think it leads to a lot of the challenge here is going to try to keep this all packaged and on track so everybody can kind of stick with it, because there's so much here that not only your lifestyle, like the way you guys think, your energy, all of that is, to me, unique. And I think it's denoted by your success, but also just like what you've created in this landscape here in the hill country. It's impressive. And then Marshall came along. Old Marshall.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, Marshall.
Yeah, so I came on with the meat company, Force of Nature, right before we launched this late summer, early fall. Been in the consumer products industry now for a better part of a decade, and spent all of my life just being extremely interested in agriculture and meat, and through hunting just really became more and more interested in how I fed my family, where the meat came from, and that just leads you down the path of thinking about where store-bought meat comes from and how those animals are treated and how they're raised. And got to know some of the guys at the Epic team over the last couple of years, just being in the industry, and started to have conversations about what they were doing at Epic, and was super interested and excited about it, but timing just never worked out. And then the conversation shifted over the last couple of months to start talking about Force of Nature and this idea to really scale the mission and create this company around regenerative agriculture. And it was just extremely excited for me, and it just kind of married my passions with kind of what I'd done professionally, and it's been a dream opportunity so far. I'm extremely excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is it's new, right? It's raw. Like, it's got a lot of your ideas and your energies and your philosophies and ideologies like implanted in it. Not only the ranch in which we're sitting, but the company that you guys. It was September you launched it. Is that right? Or was it sometime this fall? Was Force of Nature launched?
Yeah, we did a broader launch in September. We were doing some local market testing through the first part of the year, but we took it to the world in September.
Yeah. Well, I guess you guys know who I am, but I should probably kind of take everyone through why I'm here and why I was particularly interested in this conversation. It goes back to everybody hopefully have listened to our Berkeley episodes with Dr. Robert C. Jones and Matt Johnson from Direct Action Everywhere, where I really wanted to just, one, be challenged by the ideas of folks that were diametrically opposed to me and my beliefs, and kind of get out of my echo chamber and go to the opposite of what is my hunting community echo chamber and see how my ideas would hold up. And in doing that, one of the big criticisms that I received in that, and it wasn't, people were generally laudatory about those podcasts, but something that bothered me from it was something that these vegans and animal rights activists tend to do, is use factory farming to label an entire industry. And that term, in those conversations, I just kind of swept away the factory farming label. Like, yep, I agree with you, that's terrible, let's move on. I felt that I had an inability to go deeper into that subject with them and challenge them on that idea and kind of say, well, look, yes, factory farming is something we all can disagree with, but this isn't a monolith. There's so many other types of animal agriculture that need to be discussed, that should be discussed. So that was something that it bothered me, and it bothered me for the last 3 months. And then when Marshall reached out with an opportunity to talk to you guys about this, and I started reading about what you were doing, reading about regenerative agriculture, I was like, man, this could be the thing that I was looking for. The solution not to my personal problem, I'm not a farmer, but to my more existential problem of like, what is the solution to feeding everyone on this planet and not also destroying it? whether that is large scale agriculture or large scale factory farming. I think the facts are out there saying that this is destroying our planet, whether it's clean water, clean air, clean soil. It doesn't really matter. All those things are being degraded through these practices. So I started to look around for kind of my own personal solution, and I think that is here in what you guys are doing. There is people, we talked about this earlier during our tour of the ranch, people talk about trophy hunting as this moniker to kind of label all of hunting, right? You'll take that term and you'll broadly brush it over everybody that goes hunting, and now hunting is an bloodthirsty ego trip, and all farming is factory, chicken stuffed into a warehouse and being shuffled around their own shit. We know both of those aren't true, but I would say back in like episode 70 and 71, I definitely got let that pass. And that's something that I wanted to, for my personal sake, but for everybody that listens, to go and explore that a little bit further. And a lot of you wrote in and asked me to do that. So that's why I'm here. So I guess now we know why we're all here. Taylor, can you give us I know you gave us a brief rundown of Rome Ranch, but can you just give us kind of like this landscape and how this came to you? I mean, obviously through Epic, you really started caring about the health of ecosystems and a regenerative nature. But how did this place come to your mind?
Yeah, so when we sold Epic, we had an opportunity to double down on the mission and put our money where our mouth is. And so that was, for us, investing in land. And so we intentionally sought the most highly degraded piece of property we could find, which isn't hard. All farmland in the United States and globally is degraded. And so this particular property, the entire enterprise had collapsed. It had imploded because, the way that we think about farming right now, whether you grow plants or you're doing industrialized livestock models, is how do you extract maximum product at the least amount of cost. And so you're just always taking as much as you can from the land, and over time you strip your soil of the ability to produce food. And so this place was addicted to chemical inputs. It only grew grass through synthetic chemical fertilizer. It was addicted to pesticides and herbicides, so it was a monoculture.
Yeah, we should circle back to that, because when we were walking in one of the fields out here, you said like this field, when we took the chemicals away from it, it was barren.
Yeah.
Like the soil was so degraded by the farming practices that have been going on here for how many decades, who knows, that it is useless without the chemical treatment.
Yep. Yeah.
Fertilizer.
In these fields too, this is, if you consume a plant-based diet and you go to the grocery store, that's these fields here that were in that degraded state, those are the fields that your food is grown on. There's no way to do large-scale plant-based agriculture in a way that's complementary or enriches ecosystems or nature. You can do it on very small scale, and it's challenging, and you have to have animals as a part of that. But this was just a conventional agricultural piece of property, and so we thought this is perfect. We took soil samples, and we were less than 0.5% of organic matter, which out here it should be somewhere closer to 8%. It was unprofitable. Nothing was growing. You couldn't have livestock out here. So this is the land for us to show that through proper animal management, we can actually make it better, heal it over time. And, if you would have asked me when we bought the land, how long would it take to get 100 bison on your property? I would have thought we were doing good if it took 10 years. And we've been able to accomplish that in little under 3 years.
Yeah. I think we should set up, before we get too deep into this, the problem that we face, right? Because we talk about, talking to vegans and talking to folks, animal rights activists, and folks that would say, just stop eating meat. That there's too many cows, there's too many factory farms. If we just stop eating all that, we stop ingesting meat, we stop slaughtering animals for their flesh, it would solve our problem. Environmentally, consciously, however you would line those things up. So that there's one extreme there. I would imagine that the other extreme kind of lives with Tyson and Cargill and Purdue and what's currently going on, the capitalistic version of the factory farms and killing animals for mass production and drive-through stores where chicken comes in a bag with a picture of a chicken on it, which is my favorite thing in the world. you have those two diametrically opposed way to kind of treat consumption. I know that's kind of polar, but on a mass scale, it doesn't seem to me like when I walk through the gates here at Rome Ranch, I'm like, oh, on a mass scale, how do we solve this problem that we have to eat? Our American diets are so trained to process foods. We're so trained to having it now. We're so trained to being disconnected from this. We all have to eat. There's 300 million of us hanging around. What is it that we are going to do to solve this problem that is clearly degrading our land from an agriculture side and from farming of animals? So there's to me, there's really no solution within those two polar discussions that can be achieved without wrecking our planet, which we're currently kind of doing.
Yeah.
FAO.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think it's important because you referenced your earlier podcast on the vegan side of the conversation, and I think, totally agree. You just presented exactly what I wanted to call out, the two extremes, right? I mean, the worst example of meat production is challenged, and we need to do better. We have to do better for the future of our planet, because it's the right thing to do for the welfare of those animals. We're as unhealthy a population as we've ever been. First time ever. The next generation is supposed to have shorter lives than ours. There's all of these signals out there that says we need to be better. The answer is not to stop eating meat.
Yeah.
Right. The answer is better meat. And one of the things that I would say in response to that is, what you do and a lot of your listeners do. Going out and harvesting your own animals that are wild on the terrain. That would be my number one directive: to connect with your food, go out and experience nature, gain a new appreciation. All of the things that you get from living that lifestyle. Not to mention the fact that the food that you're going to be nourishing yourself and your family with is, the stuff that you were designed for, right? And you're playing your role as a human omnivore and a predator species native to this planet in the ecosystem. Unfortunately, we live in a time when that's not realistic for every person, and that doesn't mean that they have to quit eating meat either. It just means, again, better meat. And there are plenty, even though it's a small percentage of the industry, there are plenty of ranches just like Rome Ranch here that are regeneratively focused, multi-species, often doing animal and plant-based agriculture, all doing it in the image of nature, in a way that we can be proud to support. And so I think, that is the path that we need to be going down. And I think internationally, there are governments and not-for-profits and regulatory bodies that are coming to the same conclusion and saying the same things, similar to the conclusions that you've drawn for yourself. And so, Taylor, what you were going to talk about as far as the United Nations view on that?
Yeah, well, the United Nations, there's a Food and Agriculture Organization that issued a report a couple years ago that said we have 60 harvests left on the planet. So that's 60 years of food production with our current state of degraded soil. So no matter what side of the equation you're on, if you're plant-based or animal-based with your diet and your lifestyle choices, we're faced with the same challenges. And so we have to do something. We're a global civilization, so it's a global problem. If our food production system collapses, it's a big deal internationally. And so one thing that we're figuring out, and this is amazing, but it's, again, looking back and ranching and making management decisions in nature's image, is how can we restore and rebuild? And there's so much we can do, but the animals have to be present on the land because they're the catalyst. They're our biggest tool. There's no technology that's better than a ruminant animal grazing in nature's image for creating all these positive ecological changes that are nourishing our soils, that are sequestering carbon. This is like our greatest tool to, addressing climate change and reversing some of these issues is taking that atmospheric carbon, put it in the soil. Well, what acts as a superhighway for sequestering atmospheric carbon is thriving grasslands. The only way to have a thriving grassland is have animals present, ruminant animals, because they co-evolved for millions of years. If you remove the animals from the grasslands deteriorate.
Can you explain ruminant animals?
Yeah. The rumen is a 4-compartment stomach, and so it's animals like cattle, bison, sheep, goats, that were designed, biologically engineered to eat grass and other plants.
Good. And we'll get to, you guys have some really, I think these concepts can kind of be tough to get your arms around, but seeing it in the context of this ranch made it for me personally something I really wanted to learn about, and I have in the last day and a half here. Like seeing it in person, being able to see the bison on the landscape, in the field, looking at the grass, breaking down the soil, talking about what you're looking for in the soil, comparing the color and the texture and the feeling of this dirt, and why that's important, I think was incredibly enlightening to me, and I'd like to get that across to people. So I think when we talk about regenerative agriculture, let me just first say that I think that there is, when I was challenged on a previous podcast about kind of what do the hunters I hang out with believe in, or what are the core principles of the people that I hang out with. This was in regards to predators, but I think in general we're talking about balance. Like I think the people that I hang around with and hunt are all about balance and all about ecosystems and all about the meat and all about this whole circle, of course, the circle of life, like the corny line goes. But somebody asked me that, and that's how I explained it. Of course, there are other hunters out there that don't think like that could be labeled in certain ways, and I think this is the same way. Like when I come and I meet you guys, I feel like here's an example of something that rings true to me from the outside when I was just reading about it and looking at it and studying what you guys do, and then from the inside when I actually got to see it, it rings true to me. Like the motivations ring true. You guys have lots of money, so you're good. You're not trying to get rich off this. You're trying to change the status quo and try to move things forward. So I would say that like that's how it feels like that to me. Like the hunters I hang out with, I think we all kind of have the same ethos. I think it connects to what you do here at Rome Ranch, whether there was hunting here or not, which there is. There's a connection in the ideology and the way that people think and the way that you guys think. So I think when you're trying to come at this, that's kind of what connected me to this place and why I wanted to come down and check it out. But we should start with the 5 tenets, right? You guys gave me the 5 tenets of regenerative agriculture. I think that probably explains it. It's way deeper than these 5 things. But Robbie, can you just run us down with the 5 tenets or principles?
Sure, and then I think I have an example that might help too to paint a picture for your listeners after we go through the 5 principles. And so they're explained a few different ways. The first one though is probably my favorite, and that is to limit disturbance of the soil. And so that can be chemical disturbance or mechanical disturbance. Chemical disturbance is what we do a lot of in our agriculture system today, which is spray it with herbicides and fungicides and pesticides and fertilizers and all of these things that are the ancestors of the chemical warfare organizations that helped us get through a couple of world wars and now help us engage in chemical warfare against nature. And then the mechanical disturbance part of that is heavy tillage, which we do for a lot of reasons, but that absolutely disrupts and kills the soil biology, which is a fantastically complex but remarkably important part of our food system.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast just on what's in the soil.
Yep.
We maybe should, but that's an interesting one. But we'll churn through this and get back to that.
We just want to tick off the list. We don't want to go deep into each one, right? So the second principle, and no, really, and I don't know, I'll say in no particular order, they're all important. But the second one is to armor the soil. So you want to keep bare dirt is the enemy, or bare soil is the enemy, right? So many bad things happen, and we can get into that, but it needs to be covered with organic matter, right? Ideally living plants with roots and green leaves that are, doing photosynthesis. And then diversity. So diversity of plants, diversity of animal species. It's just biodiversity. You want a balanced ecosystem. You were talking about that a second ago. The fourth is living plants, right? So I talked about it in cover, but the living root is what connects everything beneath the soil, which is called the rhizosphere. It's an entire ecosystem that is very alive. Nothing connects that to the sun but living roots.
Yeah, you should see these guys get excited about earthworms. God bless if there was a dung beetle out there, what you guys might do. Like there are shots of whiskey coming out. We got one. It's
pretty much
to watch sorry to interrupt, but I feel the passion for this stuff. Like to watch these guys in this room pick up a chunk of dirt and like finger through it and look at it and talk about it with passion. Earlier when we were standing on the ranch, I just described like the way that I see this stuff is black and white, right? I see dirt, plants grow out, deer eat plants, I shoot deer, I eat plants. Oh, it's great. When you start to understand this type of agriculture and also just this part of our world, which is relatively undiscovered, like once you start to understand, you can see things in color again, like the way that these guys see this landscape and they walk around it and what they point to and what they're looking for are totally different than what I would be looking for or what I think most folks would be looking for. So continue, sorry.
And the last one is integrated animals. And so those would be the five principles of regenerative agriculture. And I think to tie into the point I was making earlier about your, helping give an illustration for folks listening in would be the short film or documentary, whatever it is on Yellowstone. I think not everybody's seen it, but probably most of your listeners have, where they, reintroduce wolves, and then you see where a once challenging environment, that is a component that restores balance, right? And I think,
trophic cascade being something that they talk about. When there are no predators, there's more elk. The elk are eating all the grasses. There's less grasses. It's a challenge concept, but a concept that
it swings, right? I mean, it sometimes that happens in different scenarios and different systems and has different results. And nature is always trying to restore balance, and sometimes those pendulums swing. But I think the key principle there is everything that is here naturally there's a purpose. It has an important role to play, and that includes the animals that we farm for agriculture and the food that we grow to nourish ourselves, right? And I think it's short-sighted to say that the elimination of those species which have the potential to play incredibly important roles in our natural ecosystems that aren't being fulfilled right now is absolutely taking us down a dangerous path where we think that we can invent new technologies to do what nature is well adept at doing. And we need to be very cautious and overinflating our own sense of what we're capable of as humans, and maybe recognizing in the case of our agriculture that nature got it right.
Yeah, and I think there's interesting concepts all around here, but one of them that I was struck by is kind of like you guys are selling. You can go get a Force of Nature package of meat, whether it's turkey or bison, or we just had some pork for some wild pigs for breakfast here. All those things you're selling, that's packaged. It's got awesome branding, awesome label, like people can go and buy and consume that. That's kind of like the end of the story at some level. Like all these things happen, and at the end, somebody gets to enjoy a nice meal. In the very beginning, there's a chunk of dirt, right? Like something, it seemed to me like there was this like very micro to macro story, or intangible to tangible story, at least for the end consumer. So I think we should probably start at the dirt, and then eventually we'll get to the animals that live on it and help it, and then you guys that kill it, package it up, send it out there into the world. I think that's a good way to kind of run through all this and understand it. But the soil part of it it's the key. It's like the keystone to all of this. At least it seems to me. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like it's the thing that starts the engine here for a better landscape. Am I right in saying that? Like you got to have good soil.
Absolutely. And I think something to tie back to those 5 key principles of soil health that Robbie just spoke about. I mean, when you think about a plant-based diet or plant-based agriculture, you are fighting each one of those principles. In order to be successful, you're constantly combating nature. You're tilling your soil, you're using chemicals, you're planting monocultures, you have fallow fields for the majority of the year, and you're not incorporating animals. And so that's a big problem. So plant-based agriculture and the plant-based diet has gotten this crazy pass for decades where it's perceived that it's better for the planet, but it's not, I promise you. And today we walked in some of our fields and it was like, hey, Ben, this field you're standing in, this was monoculture row crops for, 50 years. And then we walked over 25 feet, same soil, same rain type, same climate. And it's like this particular part that you're in has never been tilled. It's never been sprayed. It's never been planted. And it's like Ben is like, yeah, I see it, man. This is like way better. And we dug in the soil and you could see it and it smelt better. And there was more life and more animals in that area. So it's like, it's crazy to me that people think that's how disconnected people are with agriculture.
Yeah.
But there's a big problem with plant-based agriculture.
Yeah. And would you, if you had to put those two things up together, right? If you were given two devils on each shoulder and it was like, hey, on one side it's factory farming, it's polluting our water, it's killing, it's disconnected from our food. The other side is large-scale agriculture that's created these big monocultures to feed ourselves corn and beans and go down the list, right? What would you rank? How would you rank them? How would you talk about that? Would you say like factory farming is way worse, or does it rank below a big cornfield?
Yeah, I think the most destructive tools we've ever created as a civilization are probably like the till, and then the chemicals used to grow plants. And so, I mean, like we can take overgrazed fields where animals were mismanaged and it was desertified, and we can get those fields back to a productive state where it's a habitat and it's sequestering carbon and allowing water to infiltrate. We can do that in, less than 5 years, no problem. But if it's a farmed field, I mean, it can take 20 to 30 years. And so it's discouraging, but it's way harder on the land. I mean, there's nothing worse for the environment than growing monocultures of row crops at an industrial scale.
Right, and I think that brings us to like the state of our soil. I don't know if you can talk it on a national scale, but I mean, you certainly can talk about it on a local scale. And I think, as you said earlier, the reason that you bought this farm is to kind of exemplify, it'd be analogous to kind of what's happening across this country, especially in Texas and across the Midwest. So, like, what's the soil like here, and what do you want it to be like? And why is it important? Because it's all we talked about today almost.
So 1 tablespoon of healthy soil, functioning soil, should have more living organisms than all humans on the face of the planet since the starting of time. And, it's the final frontier as far as what humans understand. And as far as ecosystems, we only understand about 1% of what's actually in healthy soil. So if you look at this property and you say we're less than 0.5% organic matter, our entire system is broken. And you can see that too. So like look at USDA data dating back, 80 plus years. And, in the last 2 generations, my grandparents, for every 1 pound of meat they would consume, this generation, I have to consume 2 pounds to get the same vitamins and minerals. Same happens with plants. So for every 1 orange my grandparents would eat, I have to eat 8 to get the same vitamins and minerals, which is crazy. And so it's like, where did that go? Did it just disappear? And the fact is that it all starts with the soil. It's the foundation for human health, for plant health, for animal health. And if it's been extracted and mined, then the entire system doesn't work. So a really good example today that we talked about is for every 1% increase in organic matter that you can build in your soil, you're able to capture and hold 20,000 gallons of rainfall per acre. So that's insane if you think about that, because one of the biggest challenges in Texas and a lot of the Southwest, a lot of the world is we'll go long periods of time without rain. Or when we get rain, we'll get like 10 inches of rain in 1 hour. I mean, it can be crazy. And so the health of your soil, healthy soil acts as a sponge, right? So you can actually capture that crazy 10 inches of rain. Or if you don't have healthy soil, it's going to be lost. So when we bought the property,
along with healthy soil.
Yeah, all the erosion that happens and it all goes downstream. And, when we bought the property, we would do these simple infiltration tests where you take PVC pipe, get a Nalgene water bottle, and you would measure out what an inch of rainfall would be. And you can pour it in this pipe and you time how long it takes for that water to get into the soil. And we had some areas of the property that were like 45 minutes to capture 1 inch of rain. Yeah. So, I mean, can you imagine if you have 10 inches of rain in an hour? That's all. Yeah, you're not optimizing and maximizing that.
Yeah, I lived in this country for 4 years, and there was like a catastrophic flood pretty much every year that I lived here. I mean, the Pedernales River would flood almost every year. I mean, we had some real problems with that, and that's, I think when I look back at that now, like there's a piece of that story I didn't understand. I don't understand why that was happening.
And in between those floods, we're in a drought.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, there is if that rainfall is effective and if that soil is healthy, that is hundreds of thousands of gallons of stored water per acre that we've lost to get us through those periods between those rain events.
Yeah.
And not to mention that moisture in the soil actually affects small local climates. You see, when you walk through a field of grass in the morning, on a change in temperature day, you see dew and moisture on the ground. When you walk through a field of bare dirt, you don't see those things, right? So it literally will have an impact on the climate and the precipitation in an area. And when you think about those concepts, and you think about how much of this country is monoculture row crop and tilled up throughout the year. We talked about it earlier. Just corn alone is 10% of the land mass of the United States. Think of how big that is on a map, and you're looking even at a global scale. And just imagine 10% of that being nothing but corn. That is the exact embodiment, being farmed in a way that's the embodiment of all these things that we're talking about. And so that is how agriculture and the scale of agriculture has had the impact that it has in terms of there being some negative and unintended consequences with how we've evolved our agriculture practices. And now that we know better, we should be recognizing and learning from and changing those behaviors. And that really starts and stops with the consumer and creating awareness. And then, of course, as soon as a consumer says, hey, we want better and this is what we're looking for, everybody's going to produce it because nobody wants to make something a consumer doesn't want.
Yeah, that's something we haven't talked about is how we kind of got here from a large-scale ag perspective. I mean, we know kind of how our consumptive habits, hopefully, everybody in here, and if you listen to this podcast, we've talked about it enough, we know how our consumptive habits with meat have formed and what we've done with them, and how veganism itself and vegetarianism is a modern concept that doesn't really fit with our, how we've eaten for 2 million years plus. How do you guys, what's your awareness of how we've gotten here as far as agriculture and large-scale farms and row crops and monocultures and the commoditization of those things? It's obviously a big one.
Yeah, I think, there's this illusion in our culture that food should be cheap, but there's no such thing as cheap food because, the price you pay for food at the register, that's not representative of hidden charges and cost on the environment, on human health, on wildlife habitat, on the recharge, ability of our aquifers. And so it's the commoditization of food, and especially meat. It blows my mind that consumers don't even bat an eye about paying, $15 for coffee, like a pound of coffee, or $10 for a really fancy chocolate bar that's fair trade, but they gasp if meat costs more than $9.99 a pound. It's bananas.
Yeah. I think do we? What part of our society has to change to kind of get us in a situation where the consumer is thinking this way? Because I'll go to McDonald's, I'll have a cheeseburger if I'm traveling or doing something. I feel like I should be eating it behind a dumpster when I'm doing it in an alley somewhere because I don't feel great about it. But that's part of our it's not just our American culture; it's our world culture and this is ingrained in us now, in our American diets and our consciousness. Fast food is baked in.
I feel like the rise in veganism is a symptom of a much larger problem. And to address what you just said, I feel like people have gotten to a point where at least you're acknowledging the shortcomings of what you're doing and the decisions that you're making and the system that you're effectively voting for with the money that you're buying and spending on that fast food cheeseburger. But I think when consumers really start to care and understand where their food comes from, we can get away from this commoditized system that we've gotten ourselves into. And we've gotten there because people have stopped caring and stopped looking into it. That's the only way that a lot of this stuff could have grown to scale and happen, is that people just don't care to look into it anymore. Because if they knew what was going on and they knew the impacts that things were truly having on our soil health, on our personal health, on the welfare of the animal, there's no way that people could be okay with it at scale.
Yeah. And this is a conversation that I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking about politics right now, and please stop thinking about it. I can read your minds. I know what you're thinking. I know you're thinking about words like progressive and liberal and all these types of things. Stop thinking about that. This is it's bigger than that. It's bigger than one side or the other. It's more about who we are, how we treat this planet, and what we can do for the future. I have a kid. Everybody sitting here has kids or knows a kid. We're all right there, and so I think it's just a little bit bigger than that. So as we move forward, I think I am not thinking of it in that way. These guys, again, you guys care about not only this landscape, but the entirety of our nation, and it comes through in what you do. So I think to go back to Rome Ranch and the soil part of the equation, like what have you guys done thus far? How can you boil down what you've done here to kind of start to save this place, or start to turn it around, because it was in pretty poor shape when you got it. And you haven't been here that long, have you?
No, yeah, less than 3 years.
Okay.
Yep. The first thing we did with our desertified fields, so the previously farm fields that were bare soil and zero, biology in that soil, was we put large herds of bison on them. And that sucked for the animals, right? Because there's not a lot of nutrition out there. Bare soil is super hot in Texas in the middle of the summer. It could be 140, 150 degrees, which is crazy, by the way, because you cook meat to an internal temperature to kill potential pathogens, but you're cooking your soil biology the same way if you don't cover it. And so we put the bison out on this bare field, and the field was so compacted because the terminal velocity of rainfall is like 20 miles an hour. So after hard rain events, you get capping on the surface. And so rain can't get into the soil. It actually runs off, and it's a big disaster. So we needed the bison out there. They were our tools, so their hoofs help break apart that compacted capped soil. They brought in fertility through manure and urine. And what we had to do, I'm sure your listeners are like, how does that work? There's no grass out there for them to eat. And so we had to supplement with hay. And so back to this idea of exporting, nutrition and exporting resources. That hay came from another property.
Importing.
Yeah, so we imported that fertility from another property and brought it to our field. I mean, it's all carbon that's being passed around. So we brought someone else's above ground carbon in the form of food, fed it to the bison, and went through their rumen. That manure went onto the ground. Biology was in the manure, and it started feeding the biology that was present, the little bit. And so it had a habitat to actually breed and grow. And then the bison did other things. They're great pollinators, right? They have like seeds all over their bodies. So they started spreading these seeds. Their hoofs started stepping in seeds.
How many bison at this point were there?
The first group was about 50 bison.
And why bison? We talked about that earlier. Where why, when you buy a property in Texas, not everybody's like, we'll put some bison on it. Yeah. Why for you guys was that important?
I mean, for us, they're native species. They were in this part of Texas. No one in this part of Texas raises bison, which is crazy because this would have been a part of their annual migratory path. There would have been millions of bison.
Which is hilarious because we're looking out the back window and there's axis deer from Asia walking around, and buffalo are foreign to the landscape.
Yeah, makes no sense. So for us, we wanted to see like, hey, let's bring back North America's, the national mammal, the largest, mammal to survive the last ice age, and see what kind of keystone species effect it had. And so when the bison showed up, there were birds that I've grown up in Central Texas, and I love birds. I study birds. I watch birds. And there were new birds I'd never seen in my life. And that was just through the bison's presence, right? Which is just amazing. So there's this ecosystem catalyst species that is just present, and things happen that we can't fully comprehend and we don't need to understand. Like we'll never understand in our lifetime.
Well, you should talk about a little bit about like the birds that come with the buffalo and what they do to the parasitic at the parasitic level to kind of like change the landscape.
Yeah, right.
That's interesting.
So when you have to imagine these millions of bison that would have migrated from Canada all the way into Mexico, through Texas, through almost everywhere in the United States. So when these millions of animals would have moved through, there would have been billions of migratory birds right there. And these birds would have dove into all the fresh patties, and they would have been picking through, scratching this manure, and they're effectively spreading it evenly, adding fertility to more than one spot. But what they're actually doing is they're looking for parasites and other insects in the manure. And so, they'll debug. So these parasites that are present in the bison, they get passed through the manure, they hatch and they lay eggs, and then the little offspring will climb up a grass stem, and then a neighboring bison will take a bite of that stem, and that pathogen or that parasite can get passed to the next animal. And then you have problems if that's a continual cycle. And so, the birds would eat out the parasites. So, you don't have to use anti-parasitic medication if you're able to eliminate that. And that's through managed grazing. That's through moving your animals as well as having wildlife like birds. And for us too, chickens and turkeys on the farm can do the same thing.
Yeah. You think, Robbie, like when we were talking earlier, you start thinking about how analogous what Taylor just explained is to like biodiversity And like when you introduce one species, it brings more, and then that just starts piling on itself, as opposed to a monoculture that we've been talking about, where there's one thing planted that doesn't bring more, that doesn't bring other species in to pollinate it or eat it or whatever. But I think what Taylor just described starts to get people to understand a little bit about how this becomes a biodiverse place.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what nature wants. Nature wants that balance, and it's constantly seeking it, right? So whenever we see a freshly tilled field and all of a sudden, quote unquote, weeds start popping up, that's nature trying to put living roots back into the soil and put and rebuild the photosynthetic capacity of that land by putting green leaves on it to do that energy transfer that we talked about, and to begin to rebuild what's been damaged at the hand of us as people to perform agriculture, right? And so I think an example of not just we talk about animals coming in, but even plants, right? One thing we didn't talk about today was the seed bank, and there's a massive seed bank underneath our soils, and when we spray and till, we don't allow for those seeds to come up. Or when we have heavily capped soil, not only does water not go through, but seeds don't come up either. And so by disrupting that cycle, stopping the spraying, topping the tilling, introducing the animals, and again starting to kick over some of the initial dominoes or to at least remove some of the barriers from nature's pursuit of that cycle, and just to sort of get out of its way or to accelerate it in different ways through management, you start to see not only the intended effects, but some unintended ones that in a positive way. So it's really encouraging to see just how quickly. I mean, Taylor mentioned it a minute ago, how much faster it's happening than we anticipated. Although there's a long way to go, it's incredibly encouraging to see firsthand, and why it's so important that Rome Ranch not just being a working ranch, but being an actual field experiment and educational facility to bring influential people out, and press and media and folks in our community, and really anybody that wants to come learn about this stuff, so that they can spread the word and help get the message out to your point a minute ago about what needs to happen. And it's people need to begin to understand and care. And when you mentioned the industrial model and how we got here, and I think it's important to note that I think we should give ourselves the benefit of the doubt in how we got here. I don't think somebody woke up one morning with their just some evil person said, let's commodify everything. I think we really genuinely did try to figure out how to get more from less to feed people.
There's progress baked into that whole system, right? So we're a progressive species.
So this isn't an us versus them conversation. This is hey, we need to stop and recognize that there's some serious learnings that we have the benefit to apply in what we do going forward, or to deal with the adverse consequences. And so we know we can be better. We know why we need to be better. Let's get that message out, and let's be better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I want to make sure I didn't forget is that you guys were explaining to me how not only how bison, through just how they eat and what they do, but even the design of their hooves, how they dig into the earth and they apply seeds into the soil. Like, take us through that little element, because I think there's a lot of this conversation on a macro level, but that's like just a really interesting micro thing that a bison is doing, that is very important ecosystem service, very important to the soil, that we pretty much extirpated from this environment. Like, we just took it away.
So if you go to college and you study agriculture and you want to be a farmer, in your classes they're going to say, hey, to work the soil, to aerate the soil, to plant seeds, you have to have mechanical tools. So these are the soil aerators you can pull behind tractors, and the different implements that cost a lot of money that are mechanical tools to accomplish things that we're trying to reproduce that bison do, or other large herds of ruminant animals. Elk do the same thing, but one of the examples here is a bison hoof is more of a spade shape. And so unlike a cow or a lot of other domesticated animals, it actually chips away at soil. And there's no better tool, no creation or innovation that man has ever made at pressing seeds into the soil at the right depth that's better than a bison hoof. And so one of my favorite ways to spread seeds out here is I just bomb bison with seeds. I get a handful of seeds, I just throw it at a bison. It's like so low tech, but they'll get stuck in the fur, but eventually they're going to fall out, and eventually they're going to step on them, and they're going to do our job and plant it for us. And that's the best way. It's like there's so many things happening, and there's signals, like Robbie was saying, like in a square foot of soil, anywhere on the planet, there should be about 10 to 20,000 seeds waiting to germinate, which is crazy.
So they can be decades old and still alive.
Yep. And if you went out to Rome Ranch, even today, but 3 years ago when we first bought it, and you said, I want this to be a native tall grass prairie, and you bought all these amazing perennial grasses that used to grow in this area 300 years ago, we did this actually. We spent a lot of money on seeds, and we threw them out, we planted them, and 0% of them germinated. It's because the native the native seeds didn't even recognize this as native soil. And so the bison can act as a signal for these plant species and provide the biology, the right stimulus to take what's in that seed bank and have it germinate. And so it's really fun, but every year we see different species emerging. And so like this year, you saw today, there's mare's tail everywhere.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen one of those in 3 years.
Yeah.
And so it's a step.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
You were talking about wildflowers being a thing that's really like marks this landscape. Talk about just briefly history of wildflowers and like the fact that there aren't any hanging around here, although it's cold. But
yeah, when the Germans, when the first Europeans settled this area, they're a German culture that came here, and they named this community Blumenthal, which translates to Valley of Flowers. And there's no flowers in Blumenthal today. It just doesn't exist. There's not a single flower. And a lot of the herbicides that we spray out on landscapes, they're non-selective. And so wildflowers are technically in the weed family. And so like if you're going to spray your fields to maintain monocultures, you're nuking every opportunity for a wildflower to exist. And those are things that feed pollinators and things that create wildlife habitat and serve all different types of functions. And so, yeah, one of the coolest things for me was we have a neighbor. She's elderly. Her name's Myrtle. And this past year...
Myrtle!
You can learn so much from Myrtle. She's lived here her whole life.
I wish Myrtle was here.
Country wisdom.
Myrtle came over here. She's 80. She's the sweetest, coolest old lady. And she was like, oh my God, what is that purple weed over there? What is that pink weed over there? What's that yellow weed over there? And she'd never seen these things before. They were like, Myrtle, these are wildflowers. Like, these should be here. I've never seen one of those. It's absolutely beautiful. And so, I mean, it's supposed to be here, and just get out of its way. Let those plants be present. And they do things that we'll never understand, but it's all cascading, and it's an upward cycle if it's functioning appropriately and you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of appropriate to move to the next step kind of in the process, because we're talking about bison. These bison are additive to the landscape, right? We're not taking away anything by putting them here. They're not standing in a feedlot somewhere. They're roaming free. You guys move them from place to place. Talk about what they add, like what they add to the landscape, and what the strategy is to help that happen. Because I think that's an important point.
I mean, I think Taylor already talked about a little bit about what they add to the landscape in terms of bison started here. You know, the fertility that is in the soil that has fed you and your parents and your grandparents and everybody that's been on here before us and the first humans that walked over here is largely the fertility that was put into the soil through these native or natural systems that we've been talking about. And bison are actually the largest herd of this megafauna since the last ice age on this planet. And so when you ask what role and what are we doing with the bison, well, we're trying to replicate and emulate what would happen in nature if we humans hadn't come and killed off all the predators and fenced in all of the land and converted 30% of it to row crops and a good chunk of it to concrete, etc. Right? And so as you and I were discussing earlier, we can't go back. It's too late, and we can desire and we can argue it, but the reality is we are where we are. And so one of the best things we can do is recognize that we have a massive opportunity with the people and the communities that work the land and influencing how they work that land and whether it replicates and emulates what is going on in nature, and therefore whether it's part of a virtuous cycle that's solutions-based or whether it's part of a vicious cycle that is causing further deterioration. And so here specifically, working the bison means, like Taylor said, if you're introducing them to a really degraded pasture, that would be really, it would be impossible to sustain bison without human management. It means putting them onto that land, letting them do the important animal impact activities that they need to do, making sure they have food and water and minerals because the soils are depleted of those as well, and carefully managing them and watching after them, but then quickly moving them off, understanding that if they're left there too long, it might stress them. Not to mention that a herd of bison would be roaming, pre us disrupting this cycle, would be not really spending more than a day or two in any one spot anyway. They would, unselectively eat everything there. They would urinate and defecate, so provide organic matter and biological life into the soil, as well as significant amounts of moisture before they moved on, right? And that's how those systems evolved, and they may not come back for many months. And so in a holistically planned grazing model where you're rotating based on a strategy, including the size of the animals, the size of the paddock, the condition of the soil, the condition, the climate, that time of year, geography, etc. You're moving them around in a way where you're maximizing the potential to realize those symbiotic relationships in nature, but in a controlled environment in the form of a ranch and some land, whatever size you might have, whatever resources in terms of people or financial or equipment or whatever you may have to represent that in your context.
Yep. And one of the things, like with the planning that Robbie's talking about here, when we think about this place, this ranch as an ecosystem, we're making decisions for the ecosystem. So we do things like every winter we want to become a nesting habitat for hundreds of thousands of eastern meadowlark birds, which, again, I'm born and raised in this area. I'd never seen a meadowlark in my life growing up. And so how do you do that? Well, our ranch managers make a decision which parts of the property to leave enough above ground forage. We don't graze it to the soil, but we're creating nesting habitats for these birds. We do the same thing for when the deer are having babies. We stay out of their way. We look ahead of, desirable birds that we want on the property again that haven't been here in a long time, like quail, and we're trying to create nesting habitats for them. And so we are very meticulous, very thoughtful about where we put the bison and what parts of the year when quails might be actually nesting or hatching. And then we do the same for the bison too, when they're going to be going into their rut. Where are they going to be? Like, let's put them in a part of the property where they're like peaking in their nutrition and really giving them the best opportunity to have a successful offspring.
And I think it's really important to note here too, this isn't going backwards. This isn't turning the clock back to an older method of agriculture necessarily, right? It's certainly turning it back to being less intensive and less input based, but there is new science involved. This is the latest understanding of biology and our ecosystems and applying those in a way that hasn't been done before. And this is also not to be confused with rewilding either, right? I mean, again, because we've disrupted the system, the ecosystems so badly, to simply rewild, to simply just let things rest, would take much, much longer than we could possibly fathom, because those the key players, the keystone species, and the balance and the systems that would need to be present at large scale aren't. And so this is again emulating those in at the scale of the operation and within the context of the operation. So I think it's important because these concepts are all confused regularly.
Yeah, and I think that's something like as a hunter, right, to spin it back to where kind of I sit and what I think about all the time. We hunted this for deer. There's deer everywhere. And so, all these efforts you're doing, not only enhancing the landscape, enhancing, putting back a native herd of buffalo on this landscape, they're not affecting any, like the whitetail deer herd at all. We saw that this morning. We saw 10 bucks and 10 does in the first 3 hours we were out there. So as a hunter, all the while, all this stuff you're talking about is going on, the improvement of this landscape. Here we are still able to have a hunting experience that's similar to, if not better than any other ranch around here. And then if anybody listening to this is watching our Back 40 program, that's what we're struggling with in Michigan. Like, how do we do this thing that we know is important, this biodiversity piece of the puzzle, and then also get what we selfishly want, and we know that it's selfish, is to be able to pursue and kill big bucks and have the experiences that we love. I mean, like, that's where we are. I hope that's an honest accounting for you guys and for people listening with kind of where we are, where I am as a hunter.
Yeah, I think the proof, I mean, for us, like when we bought the property, one of the first things I did, I went over to my neighbors and introduced myself and said, hey, if you give me the opportunity to manage your land, like I'll create the most beautiful ecosystem on your property. I'm going to get rid of chemicals. I'm going to bring wildlife back. I'm going to cover bare soil. It's going to be amazing. And everyone was like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's weird. That's not agriculture. I don't know what you're doing over there, but not interested. Beat it. Get off my land. And it took 2 years, and you could see these fence line images are just incredible. But literally, one of my favorite things to do when someone comes out to the property is go to a fence line where it's like one side is Rome Ranch, the next side is conventional management. And you can just stand there for 10 minutes, and you'll see thousands of birds on our side. You'll see deer just frolicking in the fields. and on the neighbor's side, there's nothing. It's just nothing. It's monoculture. It's bare soil. It's degraded land. And so once our neighbors started seeing that image, they started getting interested in what we're doing. And, they have hunters that lease their land too. So it's in their interest too to bring in deer for their properties and for their hunters. And that was like a big, exciting part. It wasn't about saving the world. It wasn't about producing nourishing livestock for them. It was, how do I maximize the value of my land? And well, for me, that means my leases. And how do I make my hunters happy? It's bring animals out to my property. And so that was the genesis for us adopting and getting more land under management here.
Yeah, and you guys certainly aren't managing this land as a normal, what I'll just say is like a QDMA type whitetail management system that I've seen on many ranches in Texas and throughout the Midwest. I mean, this is not what you're doing, but yet there's a lot of deer here, which answers a question that I've had personally, and we've asked it on the Back 40 a bunch. We talked about this last week on the show. It's like, how do we do it? What can we do? Is there a solution? Is there some version of this out there where if we understand certain principles, we can achieve all these things at once and kind of be modern hunters, but also, for us, harken back to guys like Otto Leopold and people that had a bigger conservation ethic. And I think when I came here, I'm like, oh, here it is. This is it. These guys are doing it. It's 1,000 acres, but I mean, it's being done.
Well, and again, we keep talking about nature and balance and all of the relationships that go on there. How do you create a thriving, balanced ecosystem in an area where all of the natural predators, by and large, have been hunted, either to extinction within the area or to the point of them, being so rare and frequent that their existence is marginal at best, right? Well, I mean, then that's where this management comes in, right? So, I think hunters understand management in the context of wildlife management. We're managing an entire ecosystem, and right now the best tool for bringing predator activity and predator the role that a predator would play in the ecosystem is through hunting, and doing it in a conscious, carnivore, empathetic way, like we've done. And then and one of the things I think is really fantastic that maybe you should tell it better than I should, but bringing first-time hunters out and people who haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to these sorts of things, but have an interest in making sure that the people coming out here to hunt aren't just coming out to kill things. They're actually coming out to take part and learn and grow and be better members of society and on this planet.
Yeah, and another thing to think about if you're trying to create a sanctuary for wildlife and awesome animals to hunt, we've increased the productivity of our land by 300% in less than a year too, right? And that's not hard when you have bare soil to start with, but if you can increase the productivity on your land, you can have more livestock or you can have more wildlife. And so for us, every year we're opportunistically exchanging bare soil for green growing plants and more biodiversity, food that's going to be available, more resilient, and offer options. But we're going to have 300% more animals out here than what our neighbors could hold.
We could have a heck of a dove hunt in that field we were just in not too long ago, too.
Crazy, right? It's
right,
insane.
and like that, those things that's not by accident.
No.
Like those doves are not hanging out in that field by accident. I mean, there's an equation that gets in there: A plus B equals more doves hanging around.
Yeah, I mean, through regenerative agriculture, what you're doing is essentially creating year-round habitat. And I think one of the pitfalls of a lot of deer hunters in our mindset for the last couple decades is that we think of habitat in the form of soybeans or corn crop that's just providing nutrition and habitat for those deers for a very short window of the year. So when you're doing this holistic system that works, symbiotically with nature, you're creating habitat for these animals of all types, from deer to birds to everything, year-round, which in turn is going to bring more wildlife to your property.
Yeah. And let's not forget let's not lose sight of the fact that we were sharing earlier. It makes them healthier. Healthier animals eating healthier diets from healthier soils then becomes healthier food for a healthier person.
Yeah. I mean, I shot a doe earlier within view of those bison on this landscape. I'm like, that's pretty cool. It's like all of this is cool. And then like at the end of the day, right, we start with the soil. We start talking about how you can enrich it, how you can bring that to life, which you've done to some extent here. You have many years to go to kind of get it to where you guys want it to be. Then you introduce native wildlife that helps in this system and helps produce a landscape that you desire. And then at the end of the day, when you're ready, you kill one of those buffalo, you cut it up, and a lot of times in a very communal fashion, which you guys should talk about a little bit. And then you package it up, and it's got really cool branding. It's called Force of Nature Meats, and then someone can go and buy that at a store or at a local butcher shop or whatever. And so, like, I'm sure that you would, it's not an infallible process, but damn, it's pretty close within, like, the imperfections of our natural world. Like, this process is kind of solving as many of the problems as we currently can solve, the way I see it, with consumption, with these natural landscapes, with what we all want, which I think is balance and health in our ecosystem. So I think talk about like the bison out there, how you kill them and where they end up, because I think that's an interesting part of it. And like maybe, as I said before we started all this, like the end game here, from a consumer standpoint.
One of the things that's really important for us out at the ranch is connecting consumers to where their food is coming from, so where it lives and how it dies. And so we have events on the ranch, like in a couple of weeks we'll be doing a Thanksgiving turkey harvest where people will come and they'll start with their living heritage bird, and we're going to be with them as little or as much as they need and help them with the harvest, the evisceration, the defeathering. We also do events like that with field harvest for bison. And so these are just life-changing events where for many people, it's the first time they've ever seen an animal transition from life to death. And it's super emotional. I mean, there's not a dry eye there, but it's just an incredible, enriching experience where people that have never done anything like this, never butchered an animal, never even seen a dead animal before, they'll pick up a knife and something clicks. It's like, biologically it's like in their DNA somewhere, and it just triggers, and they pick up a knife and they just start deboning something crazy, and they have no fear, and they're just tapping into these deep-rooted instincts, and they're celebrating that animal's life, and they're working together communally too and having fun, and you can guarantee that none of that animal is being wasted. And it's just,
Well, you're making farming sound a lot like hunting.
I think, yeah, I think that's how it should be. It should be closer to that.
I agree.
I think when we do a field harvest of a bison here, the bison are a lot bigger than a turkey, and so usually we're only taking one animal, and it's a community of people that are going to be cleaning that, and the end of life step is administered by somebody that's very experienced.
It's normally you, and there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, maybe Marshall next time.
But I mean, I don't want it to come across as like anybody can come out and just start firing until it goes down, right? I mean, I think it's important to recognize that how an animal lives is, and whether or not it's been allowed and able to fulfill its potential and its role in the ecosystem is critically important. How it dies is critically important, both for the fact that we're trying to honor those animals and respect it, and it deserves that. We recognize that as hunters as well, right? You don't take risks when you're not the one paying the price for those and dealing with the consequences, and that's no different, right? When it comes to a turkey harvest, where you can, it's much more controlled. It's different, but so it's not entirely like hunting in the sense of it's sporting, but I think it is like hunting in the sense that you actually go through an incredibly emotional process, and you experience something that is deep and encoded in our DNA and our history as a species that we've lost touch with. And you go through that journey in a way where you now have a connection with your food that you may have never had before, and that experience is profound. And that experience, hunters get to have all of the, often throughout their life, and I don't think you ever get desensitized to it, right? My least favorite part of hunting is killing.
Yeah.
And I love hunting. I think that recognition, how does that, there's probably some people that hear that and don't understand. They think that's contradictory. But when you've been through that process and you've had those, the blinders pulled off and you go through that journey, and then all of a sudden you realize that this piece of red meat on your plate was that animal, then all of a sudden you start to celebrate that animal after its life as much as you did during its life. And I think that is where there's been this cutoff and this disconnection between people. And that's why, 40% of food in this country goes in the garbage can. That's the rate of food waste. And these animals should never be treated like that. So, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that we're not hunting.
No, not at all.
I'll just say, I at the end of my life, I want to be field harvested. I want to be with the people I love.
I think you're around the right people to make that happen for you.
Eating my favorite food, head down, just cozy, and then lights out. And that's a disconnect, right? And that's, consumers don't recognize that, and that's one of the ideas where animals dying in natural ecosystems, it's awful, man. Like the bison 300 years ago, the weak ones would get eaten alive by packs of wolves, or they would die of sepsis and infections and just long, slow, painful deaths. And so this concept of a field harvest, there's not a more ethical, humane way.
Some guy from Austin coming out with a rifle seems pretty good as compared to the predators on the landscape, So I think all that's important. And it struck me as, like, when you guys were describing bringing people out to do that, and there's just so many parallels to what you're doing there. And then there's folks right now, assuming they can go out and buy Force of Nature meats right now. You can go out and buy bison that was raised in this way, treated in this way, and killed in this manner, which kind of like brings that thing full circle and kind of closes the loop on what you guys are doing here. Not only are and I think that's an important part of this, and where I started when I was trying to understand what you guys are doing. That's where I started. Now that I'm here, I realize that's where I should have ended. But there's some profundity in just that idea. That's the end of it for the consumer. The consumer sees some really nice meat. They're going to go home and enjoy it with their family. But there's this whole story that gets there. That hopefully, listen to this, they can learn, which I think is as important as anything.
Yep. Yeah, you can eat meat. This is the coolest thing for me. You can eat meat that's climate positive. You can eat a pound of Force of Nature beef, and we have empirical scientific data taken by a group called Qantas that shows that beef you're eating is capturing 3.5 pounds of carbon from the atmosphere and putting it in the soil. You just can't do that with anything else on the market. Nothing in the grocery store can do that. And so this is regenerative agriculture. It's giving consumers the opportunity to participate in this revolution and vote with their purchasing, their dollars for what food system they want to support that aligns with their values.
Yeah, and there's lots of, we talked about this. Robbie and I were talking about kind of consumption habits, our personal consumption habits. It's been quite a while since I went and bought red meat at a store. Probably, I don't know. I would say a decade, maybe a little bit less than that. So I have erased that from my family's lives, from my lives. It's now so normal that it's not even considered. Like, we don't even think about it. We don't go to that section of the grocery store. And then we started stair-stepping that up. Like, oh, well, what about that sliced turkey that's in there? Well, I better shoot more turkeys so we can smoke it and slice it up and have it there. So there is that process that gets you to a more thoughtful way to consume. And we know that not everybody can do what I did, or Robbie, you gave yourself a year challenge to only consume wild game or not go to the grocery store and buy meat. And so we can do that. Everybody has an opportunity to do that, but we know that not everyone is going to. It's impossible from a number standpoint, but just we just know in our culture, it's just not going to happen. We're too far down the rabbit hole. So what you guys, I feel, are doing at the end of the day is then providing this really cool kick-ass alternative with an even better story. Does that say pretty good?
I think so, and I want to be clear because I think part of the challenge with where we've landed in our food system is a lack of transparency. So
yeah.
I think a lot of what we're talking to is the potential and the power of regenerative agriculture, and all of that is 100% accurate. But you mentioned it a minute ago. I don't want to ever be confused with saying that what we're doing is perfect. Yeah. It's not perfect, right? Even the pledge that we have all of our sourcing partners agree to says we know we're not perfect, and we know we're not ever going to be, and so we will never achieve a level or a standard that we will be satisfied by, and that you recognize in partnering with us that we're going to be raising the bar every year. And that we know that where we're starting is in a challenged situation. So we can't just flip a switch and go from where we are broadly and at scale and be perfect. And you and I were talking about that earlier, right? We can't let perfection be the enemy of progress, but we also can't celebrate excuses and not try. And so, none of us as individuals in this room or listening to this podcast are perfect. No company out there is perfect. Force of Nature's not perfect, right? And I don't. But we're going to do everything we can to be transparent about what we're doing and who we're working with and the why and the great outcomes that we're promoting and producing. And then we're going to be transparent about where we're not perfect, right? And while our ideal is field harvest, that's something that can't in today's infrastructure and world isn't scalable at this with what we're trying to do. So I don't want just in the name of transparency, I don't want everybody thinking we're field harvesting every animal across every species because we're not. That's something we'd like to get to, but we are absolutely sourcing from ranches just like Rome Ranch that are practicing these regenerative protocol and their own context on their land, and working with them to get better in varying ways, and continuing to offer more and more parts of the animal so that we can find more and more ways to support not only those individual ranches, but the communities that they're a part of. Because one thing we haven't got to is how challenged those communities are, and then ultimately get that really great food distributed at a scale that doesn't exist today. So mission-driven purchasing by folks listening to this podcast and their friends and family and everybody else, they can have access to this sort of stuff if they can't harvest it themselves.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest question coming out of this for anyone, right? Like, how scalable is this? Can this be the solution? And how can this be affordable? But before we get to that, I'll just say, I may sound like a fanboy right now. It's only because these dudes that are sitting in front of me are walking the walk. I just saw it. They're devoted their lives to walking the walk on this stuff. So that's exciting to see people that are out there making a difference, trying in their best the way that they believe is the right way to do something. But not only doing that, but devoting themselves to the practice, which I think is what impressed me the most. But I think back to that, that's a question to end on. I mean, there's a million questions that come out of this discussion, but I think the main one is, and for me personally, is can this be, is it scalable? Because that's the issue, right? The issue is scale, right? If we were just polluting a little bit of the water with a little bit of fertilizer and chemicals here and there just to get by, it'd be fine. But we have a mass appetite for processed foods. The American diet is based on these things. And here we are in a position where we are really habituated to these things. Like I said, it's nothing for even the most thoughtful of us to ride up and get a Chick-fil-A sandwich. And so here we are with a potential solution that needs scale. What the hell do we do?
Yeah, I'll start off. The exciting part for me is learning that if we took all existing agricultural land in the United States, and we increased the productivity of grazing land by 30%, we could eliminate feedlots and factory farming. We could make it illegal. It could no longer exist in our civilization. So that's taking existing land, improving its productivity by 30%. Now we've increased the productivity here by 300% in 3 years. Now it's not that hard to do. And so it is scalable. It can feed a growing population because when you do these regenerative practices, you're able to take a given acre of land and like when we started, there's 70, 80% bare soil. And as you're able to reduce bare soil and grow green growing plants, you can feed more life. And so it's just win-win-win, but it's absolutely scalable. And it's not only scalable, we have to scale it because like I said, we have 60 harvests left on the planet before this entire food system collapses. Now is the time to turn it around and actually regenerate and restore and build and heal.
For the small-time farmer, is it affordable? Is it something that they can enact in a way that would fit their pocketbooks and their wallets?
There's actual research out there that shows that it's not only affordable, it actually improves on-farm profits. If you think about diversifying your offering, all of a sudden you go from maybe one or two revenue streams seasonally to potentially dozens of revenue streams across plant species and animal species. You have lower input costs, you have increased management costs, but all of these things balance out. And time and again, when we've seen it employed, you actually see, oftentimes in moments of desperation, this is sort of the Hail Mary play, the last shot, and all of a sudden you become a pioneer in your community that becomes a leader that others follow. So yes, it can be done at small scale. Yes, it is scalable. Number one, it's certainly more scalable than plant-based agriculture because it can be practiced on a third of the planet that plant-based agriculture can't be practiced. But also, I haven't seen a plot of land where allowing nature to fulfill its potential doesn't improve that land. I just can't see a scenario where it doesn't scale. Now, it is going against the grain today. We have a highly efficient, highly optimized system geared towards one thing and one thing only, and that needs to change. So it's a little more challenging today than it should be, but that system can change. And it's already beginning to change. We've seen it through the center of the grocery store. We've seen it through the perimeter of the grocery store and different, commodity items. And again, it happens at the hand of consumers. So consumers begin to recognize that they have the position that they do in terms of dictating what happens, and we will see it scale.
Yeah. What are the biggest hurdles you guys have in your company and this regenerative agriculture? What are the things that keep you up at night worrying?
Yeah, the biggest hurdle for us so far is communicating to consumers the true cost of meat. That's a big hurdle. Again, people want like cheap meat and they want it convenient, but that's just not a reality. Like if you're going to do things right, it costs a little bit more money on the front end. So that's for sure our most challenging marketing hurdle. And the other thing too is we think of like this plant-based community as false prophets. And so they're maximizing, they're at a point in time in history where they're successfully leveraging this campaign against meat and against livestock, saying that it's bad for the planet, bad for society, bad for human health. And it's completely backwards. There's no truth in that. And so we have a very heavily funded competitor. We think of like the Impossible Burger as our competitor. We don't think of other livestock-based producers as our competitors. It's the false prophets.
Or we don't think of other regenerative operations as competitors. We would call them our allies. But when we talked about earlier about our tagline of reclaiming the legacy of meat, that includes reclaiming it and redirecting it from those large incumbent players that have taken shortcuts and fully, ran us down a path while we had blinders on as consumers that I think we're now waking up to. And we need to reclaim the legacy of meat from that, because meat's under attack, and it's under attack for the position that they got us into. And certainly we need to reclaim it from these new false prophets that Taylor was talking about that are, also being similarly dishonest and deceitful in terms of how they're communicating their messaging. And I think the challenge for us in doing that is, again, what Taylor pointed out, the commodification or the commoditization of, these sentient animals, and the reluctance of large scale, retailers to put those products on the shelf because it comes at a price that they fear that consumers aren't yet willing to pay. So the consumer can never signal that they are willing to pay, and it's sort of, we got to get those dominoes to fall.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it with podcasts, right? The media game, but no one will ever listen to 2 hours of dudes sitting around talking about animal agriculture. That'll never happen. It's 10 minutes tweets. People only read like 100 and whatever characters, and that's been proven through this and many other programs. That's not true. People, and I want this. Like I would call myself a regular dude. I'm just, I have a podcast, but I don't do many things that are irregular other than I hunt a lot and I love my family and I want to eat right and consume right. I'd like to have a garden in my backyard. There's no buffalo back there, but I would like there to be a tomato plant if I can manage it. And then I would like to compost. And then from that, I would like to learn more about having chickens and getting my eggs from egg-laying chickens, just like any other normal person might try to do. I came to all that from hunting. A lot of people are doing it in the reverse, and we like to celebrate that. So I would just say on a personal level, like all these things are exceedingly interesting to me. And when I think about consumption and going outside, and I think about this all the time, and people are listening to this obviously think about it all the time, like these concepts all come together, like hunting, bison, soil. And that's something over the last couple of years I've come to realize. I've learned a lot of terms, like ecosystem services is a term people know that I love now because I can literally talk about anything I want on this hunting podcast. Like snakes, ecosystem services, coyotes, ecosystem services. So there's like that, and then there's also the transformation of an animal from a dead thing to the meat that I love. And being a part of that transformation is enlightening, has been enlightening to me, right? So then I think a lot of that is symbolized in what you guys do. And regenerative agriculture is an important part of that conversation. I really do feel. Is there anything that people can go read, or is there someone you could point them to if they want to dive into this practice and learn about it?
Yeah, I'd say my favorite book to start off with is Defending Beef. So check that out. It's written by a vegetarian named Nicolette Nyman, and it's an incredible book, but it just goes back to meat consumption in America and how livestock can actually be a massive solution for some of our greatest threats of civilization, and especially when we think about ecology, how properly managed livestock can save the planet. And it's just so compelling, and it's research driven, and it's really exciting to read that as a meat eater.
I think I would say, there's just so many great books. There's a pile of them sitting over there. We actually have we have two things. One, we're working on a sort of resource library on our webpage, so forceofnaturemeats.com, because we really want to be able to be a content company and be a platform to connect people to concepts that are important to them. There's so many issues that tie into our agriculture system and how we produce food, and particularly food proteins. And I don't know who cares about which thing, right? So I don't want to sit here and tell you the whole story and make you listen to it. I want to connect you to what you care about. And so that's how we're looking at Force of Nature as a content creation company and a conduit between people and their values and learning about what they care about so they can make the best decisions. So check out forceofnaturemeats.com. Go to our blog. We have articles broken out by, topics, whether that be conservation or whether that be regenerative agriculture, or, and the list goes on. And then we are working on and beginning to work with, getting guest contributors to come in and share content as well. So again, we just want people to be able to educate themselves and to choose what they want to learn the most about. And part of that resource library will include recommendations on readings. And Defending Beef is actually a book we sell in our own on our own online store. So you can buy our meat online, but you can also buy other stuff if you really want to dive into this and start to educate yourself. And obviously we have an email address, and so without boring everybody with a long list of stuff, you can email us on our the info at forceofnaturemeats.com, and we will overwhelm you with ways that you can go inform yourself.
Yeah, that's one thing that's also impressive is like the ideas and the product are, they're not level set, but they're all there, laid bare for everybody. And for guys like me who just grew up hunting and has been on this exploration, much like you, Taylor, and your wife Katie kind of went on this like dietary exploration and then landed somehow here in this amazing place. That's what I'm doing. I know Marshall, same thing. Like you and I grew up hunting. It's very like love hunting, but it's led us in these down these paths, where you can find out different things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, we better go get that deer meat to Myrtle. Oh, Myrtle. We can't leave this without talking about Myrtle, because I've never met Myrtle, but she's like to me like the patron saint of Rome Ranch.
What describe Myrtle to us, having never met her?
There's no way she's over 4 feet tall. There's no way. Like Myrtle has been described to me as this 80-year-old. What her parents were the first settlers of this ranch in this area where Taylor and Katie bought some, but not all of the ranch. And so she still lives here. She's 80 years old. She doesn't have any teeth, which is fine. Like we've all been there.
Oh, poor Myrtle.
Myrtle, we love you, Myrtle.
Sweetest lady ever.
And like in my picturing, she's very like short. She's probably wearing a shawl. Definitely has a cane. She's one of those people that hugs everybody she meets. I feel like she's a pretty handy lady. Like you guys were telling me that she's just like probably just like splitting wood out back. Like,
all day.
Myrtle.
Country CrossFit.
Country CrossFit for Myrtle. So Myrtle, Myrtle's the patron saint of Rome Ranch, and may she live on. And we're going to feed her and all her 80-year-old. How many other friends did you have that just want deer meat?
It's growing, but yeah, now we're harvesting these management deer for the elderly in our community, and Myrtle's kind of like
Myrtle's like she's like the broker.
Yeah, she's the broker.
She's brokering these deals, or she's like, Dolores will take 2. Like, wait, Dolores will get. Oh, we only shot 1. Well, she would like 2.
Exactly.
She's very hungry. She has lots of friends.
Yep. All of her friends have like stereotypical 1800 names.
Yeah.
Like
what
Beatrice
was one? Beatrice.
Yeah.
They're all in there. So we appreciate. Shout out to Myrtle, who I've never met, and hopefully maybe I'll never meet her, and she'll always be in my mind as the keeper.
I like it.
Of Rome Ranch. But well, thank you, boys. Thanks for having me out. I really appreciate it.
Ben, before we go, I think we got to touch on that artifact that Taylor's holding in his hands.
Yes. We can't go. This is, what the hell is this thing? All right, so I'll share some stuff on the Instagrams there. You guys can go and see it. Marshall and I were out deer hunting for Myrtle today. We were out collecting some stuff for Myrtle, and there was an old cave up in this cliff face that Marshall and some folks had explored before. So we went crawling up in there looking for cave paintings and stuff, which we found. And on the way back out, I think probably us belly crawling through this cave disturbed the sand and the soil enough that we unearthed this like toothy, bony, claw-looking piece of what the fuck. No one knows, and it's a mystery. Like, so we got to go around and say what we think it is. Taylor, can you just describe what you're holding in your hand? Because this is a big deal. Write into thc@themeateater.com and let me know what you think this thing is. I'll post a picture of it, but it's interesting.
So it's Ben said 2 feet, but he might have been exaggerating a little bit. It's 2 inches, maybe. But it's a better story. 2 foot.
It's a better story. If it was
but I don't. So yeah, early poll for me, it looks like a crescent moon. Part of it is like ivory colored, and then the second part of it's a little bit more gnarled and oxidized. And I'm saying it's a black bear tooth.
Black bear tooth. We looked at I said black bear claws because I wanted it to be a white claw for the jokes and such. But it's not. Like, I looked at black bear claws online, and it just can't be. There's no way. And so I'm stumped. I don't know what it is. A talon, possibly. I was thinking like a cutter from a javelina or a hog, possibly.
Where we found it makes it even more challenging to dream up what it could possibly be, because we found it about 15, 20 feet up into a cave that you can only crawl in on your hands and knees. And this thing was just buried in the dirt. So you got to imagine, one, it either was brought there by something else, or it managed to crawl its way up there and was making some kind of life for itself.
Could
so
be.
that kind
Could
of
it be
adds to the.
Could it be like a badger claw, or some sort of like it's too? It just it could
I think
be.
I'm going bare tooth.
Bare tooth. Yeah, I think tooth or claws are where you got to start
for sure. Was it by possibly the cave painting that was the arrow going down? I mean, was it placed
It was
there?
right in the
right in that
general
zone,
vicinity. Yeah.
There's some more stuff there we should excavate.
You should look up. There's a bunch of rodent bones and like raccoon, stuff in there. So there's
some
a story.
bone tools.
It's cool though. You guys found the coolest thing I've ever seen on the ranch.
The Rome Ranch artifacts. That's going to go in there. So I will post this so you all can vote on it. I don't know that we'll ever. There's enough of you that we'll figure it out, maybe. But we'll try to make sure we have some good photos of it so you guys can judge. We'll put it next to something for scale. I would really like to know what the hell that thing is. I'm just gonna go with the claw, but I'm probably wrong.
I just got a text from a Texas Parks and Wildlife Department biologist who just said he thinks it's a black bear.
Ha!
Tooth.
It's a black bear
that's so
tooth.
cool.
So
man.
black bears haven't been in central Texas probably for 100 years, 120 years.
You're not going to find anything cooler than that unless
That's pretty neat.
Unless it's saber-tooth tiger.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I think that's denotes how cool this place is, not only the country, but what you boys are doing here. So, hell yeah, thanks for having me out here.
Yep. Come
Thanks
back
for
anytime.
coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Been
All
fun.
right. It's awesome.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
That's it. That's all. Another episode in the books, this time number 88. And Phil, we're taking THC on the road.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, you're not going.
What?
Yeah, no, you have to stay here.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, man.
It's okay.
It's the Star Wars thing. Yeah. That's what kept
I
you-
thought it
locked you
might be
down.
that.
So to close out here, I did tell people that we were going to kind of talk about Dr. Phil Medicine Woman as a segment of the show. I would guess, and this is better than I thought, that it's about like 55-45 in favor of your top 10 list about Star Wars. I thought people would just revolt and it would be shut. This whole show would be shut down.
Hold on, you're saying that listeners of a hunting podcast,
You're telling me.
specifically a podcast that gets into like the ethics and the nitty gritty of what hunters do,
Yeah.
they all weren't interested, or you didn't think they would be interested in hearing a 12-minute diatribe
Yeah.
about the Star Wars films?
Listen, I'm connected to my audience, and I felt that maybe they didn't want it. But I wanted you to have your
Wow.
dream. I wanted a young man who didn't think he would ever get to talk about Star Wars on a podcast to have his dream. Dream fulfilled. You did it, buddy. We had a lot
Awesome.
of people that were into it.
Thanks.
A lot of people that weren't into it.
Okay, so you're about to set me up by saying that next time we do the segment,
Yeah.
I get to do the Marvel movies.
No, I'm not doing that.
What?
I don't even know what that is.
No.
Marvel movies?
Never mind.
I'm going to act like I don't know.
Are you firing me?
No, scolding you
Okay,
briefly.
I can take it.
Like I said, it was more in favor than not.
That's great.
A lot of people wrote in like angry about
There was anger?
your rankings.
Oh, sure. Well, I fully expected that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
fully didn't expect. I was like, people are gonna be like, somebody did review our show.
People
on
are passionate about
Somebody
it.
did review our show on iTunes. Let me pull it up here. It's
Did they give you
fantastic.
1 star because I ranked The Last Jedi
Yeah.
so high?
No, this is the one we got. It says episode 87 is stupid. Title says it all. Unbearable. Shut up about Star Wars. That was so. Thanks for that, Phil.
Wow. Well, I told you that you brought this on yourself.
That's true. I did.
You sowed and then you reaped.
I reaped all the times that I've doubted you. You came through. But that guy didn't like it. But we have something we got to do. I think we have 2 competing ideas here. 2 good ideas, I feel. And by the way, as I was traveling to Texas, I didn't get to review your sound effects that you made for your segment.
Nope.
Badass.
Thank you.
Well done. We're keeping that.
Good.
Play that real quick so people can hear it.
Sure.
Dr. Phil, this person needs surgery now.
Don't worry. I'm on it. My work here is done.
Hilarious. Hilarious.
Big shouts to producer Corinne for coming in.
She in there too?
Yeah, she's the nurse.
She's the nurse?
She yells at me.
Oh, it's fucking great. Well done. Anyway,
thanks.
you have to write into thc@themedia.com. We got a thing we're doing now. We have 2 good options for going forward that doesn't include any kind of movies about fantasies, whatever you're into. One of them that somebody wrote in I thought was good, that Dr. Phil Medicine Woman becomes a segment about you learning to hunt, in which you chronicle your learnings.
I think that's a great idea.
I do think it's great too. But we're going to put that up versus people write in with their inter-hunting community debates. Like, I like crossbows and I like bows. And then you as a non-hunter help them come to grips with what the answer really is.
Okay.
And so basically, do you want Phil to discuss his learnings as a journey of new hunters, or do you want him to really help everybody's debates and cover up some of that angst we have in the hunting community? So those are both thank you to the listeners who wrote in with that. Listener suggestions, I thought they were both wonderful.
I think they're good. And I'm just throwing this out there. Because I'm not going to be hunting every week.
Yeah.
You would. So yeah, I mean, on times where I have stuff to report about my hunting experience,
you could come in.
That could be the segment on off weeks.
Oh man,
I could do that because that would also be a learning experience for me.
It would.
Is being a sort of judge about topics that I know nothing about.
Yeah,
it would be a lot. It would be a dialogue between us asking you.
Well, listen, it's up to you guys there at thc@themeateater.com. It's up to you. So write in thc@themeateater.com. Tell us what you think, because this is a big decision for the podcast. Because Phil's going to get to do this at least once a year, if not twice a year. So you never know.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a big. For me, it's a big. I'm giving something up. This is all the power I have in the world, and so you've taken some away from me, Phil. Son of a. So that's it. That's all. THC 88 is done. Hopefully you learned something from our boys at Rome Ranch. Thank you to them. Thank you to Taylor and Katie and Scout, their little girl, and to Martha and Marshall and everybody, and Cody and everybody that hung out with me while I was at Rome Ranch. It was a good time. They're really, really good people. And they have what I believe is a good mission and something that I want to learn more about. In fact, the ranch manager, Cody, who's a soil nut, shout out to Cody, sent me a whole list of reading materials about how to learn about soil. And so I got to get off here and get to read. So write in. Tell me what you think about soil. But moreover, just Phil. What do you think about that?
No, I like the soil. It's more interesting than me.
That's a good place to end. See ya.
Stay here too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven. Sitting as the bar stool starts to grow roots. I'm feeling like an old worn out pair of shoes. Oh, tell me what is it that I should do? 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 That I should do?
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.